Good morning, good morning. Gee, it's great to start your day with coffee with Karma today. Good morning and happy Wednesday. So today I'm asking, are you tracking the right metrics in order to see if your book marketing is effective or not? Now, if you caught last night's webinar or are watching the replay that was all about how to create a book marketing plan, you'll know that part of what I said was to set up milestones so that you can measure your success. Well, in this episode of Coffee with Karma, I'm going to share with you 5 metrics that you can measure to test the effectiveness of your book marketing. And I'm going to tell you how to measure them. So let's get started. The first one is website traffic and engagement. So this measures the number of visitors to your website and how they are interacting with your content. If you have Google Analytics set up, and let's say if you have a WordPress site, this is relatively easy. There are several plugins that will work with Google Analytics and measure this information and give it to you in pretty little charts so that it's not like you're crunching numbers. So, Google Analytics has a plugin. There's a plugin called Metrics. There's a number of them. So if you have a WordPress website, this is super easy. If you don't, I'm not as well versed in non WordPress websites, but check with your web designer, your web person, and see how they can set up analytics for you. And you can also set up a Facebook pixel on specific pages so that you can measure the traffic to that specific page. And if you do this with your book pages, you can understand how many people are going to your book page compared to your overall and where they're coming from. So for example, I don't have it set up I don't have pixels set up on my websites yet. That's on my to-do list. But I do have Google Analytics set up, and it gives me a little chart that tells me where all my traffic is coming from, and about 1/3 of all my traffic comes from Pinterest. So if I'm gauging my social media, I know I can't let go of Pinterest because that gives me 1/3 of my traffic. And so I actually doubled down on that, and I went from, I think, when I first started really double downing on Pinterest maybe gave me 10%. I got it up to 1/3. And I'm really doing something very, very simple. Whenever I have a blog post, I post it on Pinterest 3 different times, 1 month apart, and that made all the difference. So there's when you measure your traffic and your engagement, so that's the traffic part. The engagement is how long are they staying on the page? If you've got a high bounce rate, that page is not being effective. So you need to do something to make that page more sticky. I like when pages are sticky. Stickiness. I have a gift that does that. Anyway, okay, so that's website traffic and engagement. That's important for overall business, not just your book. Second one is email open and click through rates. This measures the effectiveness of each email and your email marketing campaigns overall. And most email marketing software will measure this for you. I know that Aweber, I've got it set up so that within I think it's 1 to 2 hours of an email being sent, it will send me a snapshot of how many people are opening and clicking, which is really nice. I mean, I know that if I check in a couple of days, the click rate goes through even higher, but I always gauge the effectiveness of my subject line by how much open am I getting in that first little window. So I've noticed that some subject lines get really high engagement. People are opening, and others, like, nobody opens for days. So you analyze that helps you with that initial one definitely helps you with your subject. Your click through rate tells you how effective the email was once they got into it. Now, clearly, that means the email needs to have something to click. And ideally, you only want one thing to click. If you give people too many things to click, then it's a little harder to measure that. And sometimes it can make this because most email software doesn't really delineate that very well. Some do, some don't. The only time I have multiple links in an email is on Wednesdays when I send out the newsletter because that the point of the newsletter is sort of a, "Here's what's been happening over the past week and all the options that you could have clicked on." All my other emails are one action emails. Read this, click that, or just read this. Sometimes I actually do send out emails that have nothing to click on because I'm sending something that's inspiring, or I'm sending a little bit of news, or, something, or a heads up, something's coming, and there's nothing to click. So if you wanna have a mix on that, but you wanna measure how many people are opening, especially within that first 1 to 2 hours, and how many are clicking. Metric number 3 is social media engagement and follower growth. Um, so this measures the level of interaction of your social media and how this is translating into getting more followers. Eventually, you want those followers to turn into subscribers because followers are not that effective. They're effective. You want followers, definitely want followers, but they're even better if they're subscribers. So, for example, there was I think this happened like 1 or 2 years ago. There was an influencer on Instagram. She had like astronomical number of followers on Instagram. She had fairly high engagement. So a publisher said, "Yes, I will publish your book because we know you're gonna sell lots of books." She sold less than 100 because her followers weren't interested in her book. They were interested in watching her do crazy things on her Instagram. So publishers have gotten wise. Your follower count doesn't mean anything for book sales. It can, but usually doesn't. So why measure it after all? Well, the higher engaged your social media followers are, the more likely they are to click on an opt-in that you offer them and become a subscriber. And the more the more followers you have, the more people you have to be engaged. So it's sort of like it's the tiny step toward the bigger step. Social media it's sort of like the gateway drug to your world. So you want it. It's just not as effective selling books. It can. I I have actually gone to bestseller just posting on social media, and then other times I haven't. It's a hit or miss. Number 4, and this one's a big one, and it's a little tricky, but I got you. I'm gonna give you some tips. This is book sales and pre-orders. Now, if you are doing your book through KDP, there is a reporting function that will tell you how many orders you have, how many pre-orders you have, and for which books, which is really helpful because some of these places just aggregate it all. And KDP used to aggregate it all. I know they did because I was like, how do I know if they're buying this book over that book? Now it is very clear in KDP. The reporting feature used to be part of your Amazon author page. They've kind of moved it into KDP, probably because they want you in KDP putting in more books. But, the reporting I it's simple, it's easy to read, and it gives you the metrics you want. I recommend that on a monthly basis, you pull that data and put it into a spreadsheet because then you can, do pivot tables and charts, and I love doing that stuff. I've just learned pivot tables, and they are so much fun. Yeah, I'm a geek. But, you can do a lot of things with Excel, or you can have your VA do a lot of things with Excel to really understand what is going on with your book sales. So, for example, this year when I started off, I wanted to do a book a month. Well, it was because I was on top of my metrics that I realized that was not working for me, and so I switched up my strategy. And if you aren't tracking your book sales, you're not going to know. So, for example, when I used to not track them very well, and then all of a sudden I had a blip in August a couple of years back on selling public speaking superpowers, and I'm like, I have no idea what happened in August other than my birthday to cause a blip in sales because I didn't do any promotions. I have no idea, and it's because I wasn't measuring. Now I'm measuring, now I'm gonna know, okay, this was effective, this wasn't effective, and when something's effective, you do it again and again and again until it ceases to be effective, and you wouldn't know that if you weren't tracking. And the fifth thing is your media mentions and PR coverage. Now, not everybody's gonna have these things, but once you start getting you want to do that, you want to set up, and I've got this set up. There's a Google alert for your name, a Google alert for your books names, and then Google sends you a little email whenever it finds something that where those things were mentioned. And you want to track that because you want to know, okay, first of all, you want to know, is it a positive mention or a negative mention? Hopefully you're not getting a negative authors rarely do, but you never know. I mean, you could be, JK Rowling and tweet something that you believe in and then have, like, a whole bunch of people hate on you for it. Yeah, it could happen. So you wanna monitor that, not because you want to change who you are and what your values are. That's not the message. What the message is when you start seeing negative, you want to evaluate what are they saying that's negative about you? Why is that? And you want to address it. Addressing it doesn't mean changing your stance. Addressing it means behaving like an adult and either fixing the problem if it's fixable or going deeper into what you are so people better understand you. And so how do you measure this? I gave you one tip. One is a Google alert. There are other tools that will actually track specific media. If you have submitted something to a specific media, you want to track that particular one and see what when it comes out. And a lot of times, though, especially with the more local media, if you say, "Well, hey, let me give me a heads up when you post this," they'll do that. When I was on the local radio station, the woman who interviewed me sent me a link to the audio. So now I have that. So, I mean, it's not as hard as it nee if you're a big company, it can be challenging. I remember, I was working for a mortgage company back during the subprime meltdown, which was, I wanna say mid to late '90s? Probably no, early 2000s, and, they were the biggest mortgage company in Orange County, and they got the most press because they were the biggest fish, and the journalists were, like, swimming around, it was like a frenzy, and so my job became, in the last few weeks before the company closed, I had to gather all those mentions and put them into a report for the C-suite. That was fun. Not. But as an author, you're probably not gonna come across that. You're probably gonna have a lot less media unless you do something big. You could do something big if you become a hot bestseller, but if you and one of the things that when you're monitoring your PR mentions, when you get them, you wanna do some things with them. Number 1, slap that logo on your website and social media, especially LinkedIn. Say, "I was mentioned here," especially if it's a big one, and you wanna leverage that PR coverage for more PR coverage. You can say, "Hey, People Magazine mentioned me, Family Circle. Would you like to mention me too?" I don't know if you wanna be in People or Family Circle, but those are just examples that popped into my head. So those are the 5 things you wanna measure and how you measure them, and they help you become better at book marketing because when something's working, you know to do it more. When something's not working, you know to pivot, stop, change, tweak, make it better. This is Carma Spence saying ciao for now, and please tune in on Friday when I will be talking about a book marketing ideas inspired by retro 1980s video games. This is Carma Spence saying